Okay, this is a great question. Addie asks, something along the lines is if her boyfriend is a narcissist or if he's mirroring what he saw growing up. What's the difference between mirroring narcissistic behavior as opposed to being one? Great, great question. So a lot of, narcissists, it's kind of thought that a lot of them come from trauma, right? So it's this trauma, these traumatic homes or traumatic events in a person's life can cause a person to go one of two ways. So either they go more on that narcissistic side of the spectrum, or they do the opposite and they go more on that codependent side of the spectrum. Kind of one of two coping personalities, really, that develop around trying to survive their home environment. So what you're describing is actually something I was going to cover a little bit later, but so what you're describing is, so if we grow up in this kind of environment and there's all of this really kind of maladaptive, problematic behavior that we start modeling, right? Because this is kind of, if you grow up in like a den of dysfunction, then that's what we know to be normal, right? So that's how a person's most likely going to behave. And so there's a term for this. It's called fleas. And it's sort of like a person picks up a case of fleas from kind of a flea-infested den of dysfunction. And the difference is, so if a person has some bad behaviors or problematic behaviors, if they're willing, if they can see them and realize, like, hey, this is problematic, this is something that I want to work on, then they can. Versus like a full out personality disorder. And really, I think that this can kind of even be misleading a little bit because it's a spectrum, right? Like narcissism it's a spectrum ranging from like healthy narcissism, which is again like a really tricky term, but healthy narcissism all the way to like pathological, like narcissistic personality disorder. So there's a range in between, and this is a very common question. People are like, well, where along the spectrum is this person? And the reality is, there's no exact science to this, right? So you can kind of look at behaviors, you can kind of see where is a person's behavior, how problematic is it? Is it an event or is it a pattern? Where is their level of insight? Do they think that do they accept any of their behavior as problematic? Do they seem sincerely accountable for their behavior? Are they sincerely remorseful for their behavior? Are they sincerely motivated to work on changing their behavior? If the answer is no, then it doesn't matter if they're like full-blown narcissistic personality disorder or if it's like quote unquote fleas. If they're not motivated to change at that time, then they're not going to change. So then the question becomes back to you, where is your line in the sand? Like, where is your line for what deal breaker behavior is? How much time and energy and money are you willing to throw at therapy and trying to get this other person to change? So I think once you kind of see it from that angle of, okay, this person's got some problematic behavior, like what's deal breaker stuff for me? When am I willing, like how long am I going to hang in there? Is it 6 months? Is it 6 years? Because again, even if a person, let me use kind of a different example. So even if a person doesn't have a personality disorder, so let's just kind of like get that, because that can be confusing, right? Let's say a person is an alcoholic, or let's say they're anorexic. So it's not a personality disorder, but highly problematic behavior, right? If they don't see that they have a problem, then they're not going to be motivated to change anytime soon. So if you've got this person in your life, there has to be that point of, okay, if they're not motivated to change their behavior, then I can't change them, unfortunately, right? All I can do is change how I react to them. And so it's going to oftentimes be, letting them hit rock bottom or, like just finding kind of whatever your line in the sand is. Because even if you were to drag a person to rehab or to counseling or what have you, if they're not at that place where they're wanting to change, it's not going to be helpful. They have to actually want to be able to change. So I hope that that's helpful, because it is hard to see when are we dealing with, pathological behavior, and when are we dealing with like quote unquote normal bad behavior. But I would encourage you to look at it more of any quote unquote bad behavior is problematic, and it doesn't matter if it's to the level of personality disorder or not. It's what do you want in your life? Where is your deal breaker stuff for what's okay with you, and what you're willing to put up with and for how long? So she says, yes, he does think it's problematic. He is seeing a therapist, but there are still some patterns we are struggling with. Well, and I've mentioned this before, so just kind of for what it's worth, I guess. To me, there's certain stuff that's just deal breaker behavior, and for me, it's addiction, adultery, abuse, or a really kind of rotten attitude. How are they handling things when you confront them? Do they give you honesty? Do they treat you with dignity and respect? If a person, because here's the thing with problematic behavior, if you're experiencing like abuse, addiction, adultery, generally what you know is the tip of the iceberg. And so it's really, really difficult to, I don't know. For me, I just wouldn't touch any of that with a 10-foot pole. I would wait until a person, if you're dealing with like addiction kind of stuff, I would wait until they have a couple years clean under their belt to even consider having a relationship with them. If it's adultery, I would be out the door. For me, that's not even workable stuff, because trust is broken. And again, what you know is the tip of the iceberg. So I don't know. Everybody's at a different place when it comes to that. And I think that it's just going to be something that you're going to have to really turn inward and ask yourself, okay, where is my line in the sand? And, is there trust there? Would it be appropriate to actually trust this person based on the behavior that I've seen? And, is this person actually willing to live a life of total transparency if they have broken trust? Because that's I think kind of a great way to tell if a person's willing to be accountable for their behavior, is if they're willing. When a person breaks trust, they realize that they need to go to great lengths in order to rebuild that and to repair that. So, if they're not willing to do that, then that's a problem. Yeah, cheating to me is Pandora's box. Like, it's one of those things, like once a person walks through that door, there's just too much of an appeal there, and it's it's hard to shut that door once it's open. And the other problem too is if you're dealing with a person who has shown that that they lie, that they manipulate, that they're doing shady stuff, oftentimes when they're confronted with their behavior, they just learn to hide it better. And this is, again, what I'm saying, like it's really hard to tell. This is why I would just encourage, I don't know, again, for me, like it's too much time, too much energy to try to sort out what's really going on. Like I would make myself crazy trying to sort things out and trying to rebuild trust with a person who's not trustworthy, and to try to figure out, okay, what am I dealing with here, and can I trust them, and can this be safe? It's just, for me, that is way too much work. Like the trust is either there or it's not. And if it's not, then I'm done. Because for what you know is the tip of the iceberg. And so I don't know, like I said, for me, it's a pretty hard and fast line. T. Brown says, he's never accountable. He deceived and betrayed me. Okay, if he's not accountable for his behavior, I would pack a bag and get out the door. Because he's not sorry then. If a person is truly remorseful for their behavior, think about how you would act, right? Like if you had done something wrong. If I had done something wrong to you, let's put it this way. If I had done something wrong to you, I would be like, T. Brown, I am so sorry. This is what happened. This is why this happened. It's not okay. I totally get that you're not going to trust me. Here's what I'm going to do to repair this trust. I totally get that I need to my life needs to be an open book, and would go to great lengths in order for you to be okay. That's, I guess, the difference between being like solutions oriented, right? Versus a person who's very narcissistic, even if they're not a full-blown narcissist, right? Even being highly narcissistic is highly problematic. So if they're not accountable for their behavior, then there's no remorse for their behavior either. Because they're not even accepting it. If they can't even acknowledge it and say, this is what I did and I'm truly sorry, then odds are they're going to continue repeating it because they don't even want to fess up to what they did, let alone do the inside work, like look inward and reflect upon themselves and be like, this is what's going on. These are the real issues I have. So they are way far away from being ready, willing, and able to change. And I don't blame you for being really angry at a person like that, because it's exhausting and it's crazy making. And they can do a really great job at doing a great song and dance and therapy. And especially if you get a therapist who, is very solutions oriented, which a lot of therapists are. It's a great quality to have. But if you've got a manipulative person in the mix, manipulative people are not solutions oriented, right? They're self-oriented. So if you've got the partner of a manipulative person and the therapist to a manipulative person, those two people are very solutions oriented. They're all about improving communication, and they're just constantly troubleshooting. How can we make this work? How can we make this work? How can we make this work? How can we get through? What else do we need to say? How else can we frame it? What else, and they're just coming up with strategies and plans and this, that, and the other. And this manipulative person's just sitting back thinking like, suckers. Because if they're not ready, if they're self-interested and they're just going through the motions of going to therapy, like walking through the therapist's door and sitting in a chair isn't going to therapy. Like going to therapy is being accountable for your behavior and is willing to work through it. And they can really do a good job of charming a lot of therapists and kind of saying what they need to say. So again, I don't know your situation, you do, but like trust needs to be there. Without trust, it's a one-sided dynamic. And if they're not accountable for their behavior, then it's that kind of stuff it'll drag you through hell. So I'm sorry to say that, but that's really my 2 cents on it. And I've seen people go through years of therapy thinking that their partner's got to change, right? Like given enough love or time or rehab or therapy or church or what have you, that something can actually make this person change. But that's the thing, like when a person shows you their true colors, believe them. And talk is cheap and talk is free. And actions are what counts. So if a person's actions are saying that you're not a priority to them and that you can't trust them, look at that. And if this person, is claiming that they want to make things work and that they're really working to change, okay, fine. You could always say, okay, you know what? You go to therapy on a weekly basis for the next 6 months. I'll talk to your therapist. We'll revisit this relationship at that point, and then see. But I don't know. That's my take on it. Lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this.